All right, let's jump right into this explainer. I want you to picture something for a second. Imagine waking up, right? It's 2 a.m. on a totally random Wednesday. The rest of your neighborhood is pitch black. It's dead silent, except for the deafening, earth-shaking sounds of a massive, raging house party happening literally right next door to you. You look out your window, and there's this massive, dark suburban mansion. But there are cars perfectly parked in the driveway under a single flickering street lamp. So you decide you've had absolutely enough, and you walk over to confront the neighbor. You turn the knob on the front door, and to your surprise, it's completely unlocked. You step inside, totally expecting a huge crowd.
As you walk through that unlocked front door, you're hit with just a bizarre scene. You're standing in the hallway looking down at a massive pile of like 10 pairs of shoes. The music is absolutely blasting. It's totally chaotic. You can clearly hear the distinct sounds of a party in full swing. People laughing, yelling over the heavy bass, the sharp clink of glasses toasting. All the undeniable evidence of a crowded, wild gathering is right there playing out in front of your senses. So you turn the corner into the living room, completely ready to ask whoever's in charge to turn the noise down.
You step into the living room and the house is completely empty. I mean, literally nobody is there. The room is desolate and dark. Those loud, chaotic party sounds, they aren't real. You look closer and realize the noise is just an audio track vibrating heavily out of a high-end stereo speaker just sitting there in the empty room. There is no party at all. The whole thing is entirely staged.
And man, this immediately forces a pretty chilling question, doesn't it? If the house is empty and the party is just a recording on a stereo, who parked those 7 cars so perfectly in the driveway outside? Whose shoes are those piled up by the front door? And honestly, most importantly, what kind of elaborate dark secret requires staging a fake, high-decibel house party at 2 a.m. on a Wednesday just to cover it up? The tension here is palpable because you suddenly realize you've walked right into a carefully constructed trap or a very active cover-up. So let's back up for a second. We really need to talk about who actually owns this house. The neighbor in question is a guy named Damon. He's a 28-year-old who recently moved into this incredibly quiet, wealthy, idyllic neighborhood. We're talking about the kind of spaced-out, peaceful suburban street that's mostly filled with established families, you know? It's the exact kind of place people move to for safety and a fresh start. But from the very moment Damon arrived, he stuck out like a sore thumb in this otherwise picture-perfect community. And here's the crucial detail. To quote the source material directly, he lived like an absolute ghost. Damon was this young guy in his 20s, rocking a mullet, living completely alone in this massive, secluded mansion. He claimed to work in finance. Well, actually, whatever he really did, the reality was he literally never left the property. Ever. He had absolutely zero visitors, no one came over for dates, no friends dropped by, he didn't even have takeout food delivered to the house. He was a complete and total phantom in the neighborhood, right up until the exact moment that 2 a.m. fake party recording woke the narrator up.
Which brings us right back to that empty living room. Standing there, listening to that fake party audio blasting from the speaker, every logical instinct in your brain says to turn around, walk right out that front door and call the police. But human curiosity is a deeply, deeply dangerous thing. The narrator looks away from the stereo and notices something else. A door, slightly ajar. It's cracked open just enough to reveal a pitch-black staircase leading down into the basement. And there's this faint, sickly yellow light spilling out from the very bottom. Drawn by a terrible curiosity, the narrator makes the perilous decision to creep down those dark wooden stairs. And as he descends, the sensory tension just maxes out. The fake party music from upstairs begins to fade away, and a new, much more visceral noise takes over. It's this rhythmic grinding, heavy machinery. It sounds exactly like a heavy industrial buzzsaw cutting through something below. The air in the stairwell starts feeling thick and dusty, and that mechanical grinding just keeps getting louder and more aggressive with every single step down.
He finally gets to the bottom, peeks through a crack in the basement door, and I'm telling you, his blood just runs completely cold, because Damon isn't down there. Instead, he sees 3 complete strangers, these older, highly intimidating men standing in this dark concrete room. They're wearing heavy-duty work clothes, thick industrial rubber gloves, and protective plastic goggles. It's a deeply chilling scene. These definitely aren't partygoers. This is a cleanup crew.
But you know what's even more terrifying? It's what they're actually doing. They are standing completely still, staring at something just out of view. The narrator's line of sight through the cracked door is super limited. He can see the men, he can hear the buzzing of the heavy machinery, but he cannot see what is on the floor or the table that has their absolute, totally focused attention. The suspense here is agonizing because your mind immediately fills in the worst possible blanks about what these industrial-clad men are working on.
And then, bam! The climax of this whole nightmare hits, and it actually hits through a completely different sense. Suddenly wafting through the crack in the door is a smell so strong it almost has a physical weight to it, an overwhelming, sickening stench of bleach. It's that incredibly harsh, toxic smell of pooling industrial cleaning solution hitting a raw concrete floor. The fumes are so thick they almost seem visible in the dim light. This isn't just some strange late-night home improvement project. This is a highly organized, chemically intensive sanitation effort.
That smell? That was the absolute breaking point. Every single instinct just screamed immediate danger. A wave of pure primal terror washes over the narrator in that dark stairwell. The heavy machinery, the thick rubber gloves, the fake party upstairs to mask the noise, the overpowering smell of bleach, the sheer gravity of what he has accidentally walked into suddenly clicks into place. He is an unarmed witness standing mere feet away from something incredibly dark and highly illegal. And in that exact, heart-stopping split second of realization, the dim yellow light spilling through the crack in the basement door, it gets blocked. A shadow shifts across the floor. The light dims. Someone is coming. One of the men is walking directly toward the stairs. Panic totally takes over. The narrator turns and begins a frantic, breathless sprint back up the wooden steps, absolutely desperate to escape before the basement door swings fully open. What follows is just pure adrenaline-fueled escape. He bursts out of the basement, tears through the empty living room that's still blasting that fake party music, scrambles out the front door right past that pile of shoes, and runs out into the dark street. He doesn't stop sprinting until he crosses his own lawn, bursts through his front door, and deadbolts it behind him. He is locked safely inside his own house. But the terror? It is far from over. So, a few minutes later, his heart is still practically beating out of his chest, right? He cautiously peers through the blinds of his front window, looking back at Damon's driveway. And what he sees next is deeply, deeply unsettling. Eight aggressive, older men suddenly pour out of Damon's front door. They're aggressively scanning the dark street, looking around with intense paranoia and loudly arguing with each other out there in the driveway. And notably, Damon, the young guy with the mullet who actually owned the house, is nowhere to be found among them. This whole bizarre, unbroken story basically concludes the very next morning. When the sun comes up, every single one of those perfectly parked cars has completely vanished without a trace. Months pass, overgrown grass, rotting packages on the porch. Damon never returns to his property. The house just becomes this decaying monument to whatever happened in that basement that night, leaving a permanent, haunting void in the neighborhood.
Section 1. The Paranoia Prompt. The Psychological Turn.
Now that we've gone through the story, let's unpack this a bit. The morning after the incident, still completely shaken, the narrator goes out and starts asking his other neighbors if they were disturbed by the massive 2 a.m. noise. And here is the truly terrifying realization. No one else heard the deafening music. The houses in this wealthy neighborhood were so large and so spaced out that not a single other person heard the blasting stereo that woke our narrator up. In a neighborhood full of families, he was literally the only one who noticed anything was wrong.
Which really brings us to this fascinating clinical concept, the psychology of isolation. We have this deeply ingrained belief that living in a quiet, wealthy suburb with spaced-out homes and beautifully manicured lawns equates to safety. But the reality is actually the exact opposite. That exact spacing, that extreme privacy, creates complete vulnerability. Think about it. If a team of men can run heavy machinery and industrial bleach in a basement while blasting a fake party next door and literally no one else hears it, you aren't safe. You are just completely, utterly alone.
And that leaves us with one final, kind of lingering thought for this explainer. The illusion of safety is really just that, an illusion. You see their cars parked in the driveway, you see their perfectly cut grass every morning, but when the doors are locked and the blinds are drawn, do you actually have any idea what your next-door neighbor is doing right now? Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and honestly, I hope it makes you look at your own street just a little bit differently tonight.